A real mum and dad. They were lovely and they treated us beautifully. Dad never hit us. Mum did on occasions, but Dad was too strong to do that, I think. He was afraid of hurting us. When he'd go out to that place to work in the season's time, he'd be away for a week. Shearer, he was everything, he was a real farmer. When he came home, he'd always have whiskers and we'd all run up to the gate to meet him. I wouldn't kiss him. I said, no, I'm touching you until you get rid of those whiskers. Mum, she did a lot on the farm too, and when Dad was out at those places, she did the milking, etc., and we all did, separate and do all this kind of thing. It was in the Depression time. No, it was a hard life for both of them. But they were very Catholic, had great faith. He'd always be the first at the church. Oh, this was my dad. I was close to both of them, very close. I was born in 1923, but I don't know whether it was in Mildura or whether it was in Parkes. 8. Fred, Pat, Nellie, myself, Irene, Francis, Dorothy and John. The first one, he died when he was 2. And then the next one is Pat, my brother. He's gone to heaven. He was 96 when he did. We had our ups and downs. We'd have our squabbles and one thing and another, but we were a good, close family. We used to play cricket and all that kind of thing. But now on Monday morning, we did the washing because Mum was out milking. We worked a lot on the farm. Rosary every night, and we'd go over to the neighbours and play, and Dad would call us home for the rosary, and then he'd say, you can play and sleep all night, but then you come to the rosary, you go to sleep. And they were always at Mass, never missed a Sunday Mass. And we used to walk. We didn't have a car or a sulky, so we used to all walk into Mass. It was 4 miles to the railway station, and then we had another few miles to go to get to the church. I was told I was a real tomboy, but I was only 11 when I went into the Parkes convent to help the sisters. That's where I stayed until I entered. I was taken into the convent. After benediction, we always went to benediction. Mum took me over to the convent. It was pitch dark. The boarders had gone to bed, the sisters had gone to bed, and one sister stayed up. And she took me up the boarder stairs, which were pretty rickety, and showed me my bed and showed me the bathroom and left me. I didn't go to school on Monday all that year. I helped in the laundry all day. And the sister that I met in the kitchen eventually asked me if I'd like to be a nun. And I thought they were born nuns. But I said, yes, I would. And I never changed my mind. I don't know whether I could call it trouble. When I went to school, I got the slap every day. I couldn't answer the catechism questions. I knew them as well as anything, but I could not say it. Stand in the back of the room, and then I'd get a whack. And when Christmas holidays came to Mum, I said, I'm not going back to school next year. I said, I'll go back to the convent, but I'm not going into the high school. And she didn't question me and didn't make me. So I never went to school again, 12. I just loved the sisters, and they wanted something done. Florrie will do it. She'd clean the bathroom, or she'd do this, or she'd do that. Or one music teacher wanted to have a music room. Florrie will do it. So Florrie went and cleaned the music room. I did all the messages until I entered. Banked the money, did everything. I got this urge, and I said, no, I said, it's time that I entered. I'm going to talk to the priest. So I talked to Monsignor Moran, the Mons, and he told me I better go back to school. I said, I'm not going back to school. I said to Mum, Mum, can I go to Broken Hill next year? She said, you'll have to ask your father. And I said, well, you better send him in. So when he brought in the milk that he hadn't sold, he brought it in and put it on the kitchen table, went out as quick as he could, and I went as quick as I could after him. And I said, Dad, can I go to Broken Hill next year? And he said, no. And down came the tears. And he said, if you are as in earnest as all that, and you think you can do it, go with my blessing. And it was that blessing that's kept me going. My dear Dad. I entered the convent in 41 or 42? I had the novitiate. I was professed in 43 anyway, 30 years ago anyway. I was a postulate. We did nothing for 10 days and then we went into rule. And that's when you had to step the line and do what you had to do. I was happy. Mum came over for my reception and she said to me one day, do you ever want to come home? And I said, no. And I think I hurt her. Never entered my head. All the hard things I did I hated my novitiate. It was hard. And as much and all as I loved my mistress and officers, she was terrible with me. thought I'd go home, and when I got news that I was being finally professed, I cried all day. I wanted to be a mercy sister. I went to Mount Barker, then I went back to Broken Hill. I went to Brewarrina. That was my first appointment after final profession. I loved it because I met the boarders and I met the boarders' parents. I didn't meet anyone in Broken Hill. It was lonely and I was in strife all the time. His superior said to me, maybe you'd like to be a teacher. I said, no thank you, Mum, I aim to be a cook and I'm going to be a cook. I cooked at the convent as a child and I cooked at home, and I was told that one of the sisters said, I wish she'd have an accident and then she wouldn't be making all these different dishes. But it didn't make any difference, I still did the dishes. I cooked until I went to Wilcannia, 1994. Brewarrina, Burke, Cobar. Oh, this is the quickest way. Every place in the diocese except Peak Hill and Trundle. I've been there, but I haven't worked there. I've worked in all the others, South Australia included and St Susie, Sydney included. But she said, Wilcannia is more isolated, so think about Wilcannia, and I didn't hesitate. Everybody was saying, you poor thing, you poor thing. Every day after school, Margaret took me walking through the bush down to the valley where most of the Aboriginal people lived. And what struck me first was their reserve and their shyness. And when I was going to Wilcannia, I said, what am I going to do? Anyway, she took me down there and I knew it'd be visitation. That was my mum's gift. She used to do visitation after Dad died, go into town with my brother, and then she'd walk the street visiting people. So I did visitation, mainly to the Aboriginal people. Margaret introduced me as Sister Flo, and one of the fellows said, Flo, River Flo, because we were by the river. Hello, Sister Flo. Good morning, Sister Flo. They soon got to know me and to love me. There was no problem whatever. It was absolutely beautiful. And she said, how long are you staying in Wilcannia? And I said, until I can't do what I'm doing. She said, well, you have to think about leaving too. And I said, why? But didn't matter how I tried or how anyone tried, I had to leave. They wouldn't leave me there on my own. Parks, and I've been there ever since. And I went into a room with a sister in Park. Sister Michael was sick and she died. And when I was in there, they said to me, this is Michael's room. I said, Michael, thank you for dying. I said, if you hadn't have died, I would have been sent to Sydney, because Sister rang me and she said, what about coming to Sydney until you get used to going to Parks? I said, I don't need to go to Sydney to get used to going to Parks. I said, I can get used to it here. I think I can say again, the people and the visiting that I do. And I only visit one at a time over at the hospital now. But when I first started visiting, there's 62 rooms over there. And I used to spend a few minutes in each one every Saturday. They loved me and I loved them. And they still miss me, but they're not there because they won't now give me a list of the people that are there. It's hard. I still do it. I used to go into the chapel at night time and pray with my arms extended because I didn't want to go home. And I said, where will I go? I won't go home. Important lessons I've learned in life. To be happy and kind. Being with people. Live your life to the full. As God created us to be happy. And I'll be 100 on the 28th of August. Thank you very much.